Special live severe weather briefing regarding the potential for a major severe weather outbreak across northern Illinois and northwest Indiana Sunday afternoon and evening. This is Gino Izzi with the National Weather Service here in Chicago, and we want to bring you a quick update on what our latest thinking is regarding the potential for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes across the region late Sunday afternoon into Sunday night. Current indications continue to suggest a rather high potential for a severe weather outbreak, including tornadoes across the region Sunday afternoon and evening. We're currently looking at low-pressure system developing over the Central Plains. This low-pressure system is expected to track northeastward up into Wisconsin and eventually Lake Superior by Sunday evening. Out ahead of it, very strong southerly winds are going to develop. We'll see south winds during the day tomorrow increase to 20 to over 30 miles per hour with gusts up to 40 miles per hour at times. This very strong southerly flow is going to usher in unseasonably warm, almost hot air, along with very moist and humid air. This warm, moist, humid air is going to allow the atmosphere to become quite unstable and create a rather volatile situation tomorrow afternoon. We think many areas should easily climb into the mid-80s tomorrow, and with sufficient sunshine, which is we think we have a shot of, we could actually see highs approach 90 in a few spots tomorrow afternoon. As anyone in this area knows, 90 degrees in early April is probably not a good sign, especially when you've got a strong cold front expected to come through and a big storm system arriving. So let's see, during the day tomorrow we're expecting, I guess we'll start with tonight, the warm front will lift northward. The warm front's already making progress across central Illinois. Continue to move northward tonight. There's still some potential, albeit not that large, that some thunderstorms that develop over Iowa this evening could clip portions of northern Illinois, particularly north of Interstate 88 tonight. If those thunderstorms make it as far south as far northern Illinois, they would have a potential to produce large hail and maybe damaging winds. But generally, we think the greater threat of thunderstorms and severe weather tonight will be confined to north of the Illinois-Wisconsin border. Any lingering thunderstorms should be quickly out of the area during the morning hours on Sunday. And really, by all indications, what we're looking at right now, it looks like we should see a fairly sunny day develop by late morning and into the early afternoon. It looks like cirrus or high cloudiness with jet stream should stay south of us, and we shouldn't have a whole lot of convective debris as we see it right now. Any thunderstorms that develop along the dry line this afternoon in Kansas, western Missouri, up into eastern Nebraska and Iowa, they should either weaken and or get pushed off to the northeast and leave us in a pretty sunny conditions during the day tomorrow. This should allow us to destabilize very nicely. Now, some things have kind of changed with our thinking a little bit today versus yesterday. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily a change for the better. It looks like, I guess our thinking now is I'm much more concerned about a tornado, potentially significant tornado threat into portions of the listening area, northern Illinois, and maybe even into northwest Indiana tomorrow evening than I was 24 hours ago. So current thinking now is that instead of seeing thunderstorms develop along a cold front, which is initially what we were thinking yesterday, pretty much all of the computer models that we look at are actually developing thunderstorms well out ahead of the cold front along a narrow, like what we call a convergence line, near the Mississippi or just west of the Mississippi River during the afternoon hours tomorrow. All indications are that these thunderstorms will initially be discrete supercells as opposed to solid squall line. And conceptually, this really makes sense, and this is also what some of our storm scale models are showing. I guess I should throw out there that while indications now are that this will be individually discrete supercells, forecasting the type of storm, whether it's a squall line or a supercell, is not something we're very good at. It's a skill area that it's a very young part of the science as far as meteorology and severe weather forecasting goes. So we're not particularly good at it. Having said that, what knowledge we do have in this area does indicate that we could be looking at more discrete supercells tomorrow. Having discrete supercells versus a squall line means that the threat of tornadoes is actually probably higher than what we'd be looking at, and the threat of widespread wind damage is a little bit lower. And even if we don't get tornadoes with discrete supercells, we would still have a much higher threat of very large hail in areas as well. Now, in addition, because we're not looking at these storms developing along a cold front like they traditionally would, developing along a convergence line means that the linear convergence, or the whole line basically, is likely to not light up as much as it would as if it were a cold front. So that means potential is actually there for these discrete storms to remain discrete supercells for several hours moving off this convergence zone, and possibly leading to a situation where we actually have some long track and possibly strong tornadoes. Now, initially during the afternoon, we're worried that the sunshine, deep mixing, the really hot and humid temperatures might actually make conditions not particularly ideal for tornadoes. So the initial supercell development during the afternoon may not be ripe for tornadoes. It might take until near sunset or shortly after sunset for the tornado threat to actually increase. By sunset, we're looking for the temperatures to cool just a couple degrees. The dew points might come up a degree or so, but more importantly, the low-level winds, the winds maybe 1,000 feet off the ground, will go from about 20 or 30 miles per hour during the afternoon to almost 60 miles per hour tomorrow evening. That very strong change in wind from right at the surface to just above the ground is known as wind shear, and when you get it very low to the ground like that, the potential for storms to become tornadic greatly increases. Now, again, there's certainly a lot of uncertainty looking out 24 hours or more into advance trying to forecast storms. It's possible the storms could develop further west and this be a problem across mainly eastern Iowa and Wisconsin. It's possible that the storms might develop a little further east and that the most significant tornado threat could be right over northern Illinois and northwest Indiana. It's possible there's many things that could go wrong, I guess is the moral of the story here. Having said that, the data that we're looking at right now suggests that we could have a window of possibly 2 to as many 5 hours, to as many as 5 hours long, where we have supercells and potentially long-track supercells producing tornadoes, and even the threat of strong tornadoes. I think that regardless of where the storms are, whether they're in eastern Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, regardless of where they are, I think the prime time for tornado potential is probably going to be between about 6 p.m. and maybe 10 p.m., possibly as late as 11 o'clock at night. But sometime in the evening hours looks like the most favorable time for tornadoes tomorrow, wherever the storms may be, which is kind of tough to say at this distance. The other thing to mention is that because these storms are developing out ahead of the cold front, we'll also, if any situation were to occur where you actually did have any kind of damage that occurs with the initial storms, any kind of cleanup or anything that's going on in the result of that will need to be aware, because we could have additional thunderstorms develop along a cold front that would move through later Sunday night into possibly the very early portions of Monday morning into far northwest Indiana. Those storms would likely pose a much lesser severe weather threat, but it would be obviously a threat to anybody outdoors dealing with any kind of aftermath, if there is any, from the initial storms. So I know this is sounding a little bit more gloom and doom than it was. SPC, the Storm Prediction Center, has expanded the Day 2 moderate risk to encompass much of northern Illinois. Some of the discussions have already mentioned the possibility of an upgrade to a high risk, which is exceptionally rare occurrence for this portion of the country. The last time any portion of Chicago's area of responsibility, the National Weather Service Chicago's area of responsibility, the last time we saw a high risk of severe weather was back on June 8th, 2007, so it's been nearly 4 years now. So if this were to get upgraded to a high risk, that's what we're looking at, is how unusually favorable a situation this is. Having said that, we've talked about favorable situations in the past that haven't panned out, and in order to get significant tornado outbreaks, you really need every ingredient to come together just right. So if any one ingredient fails to materialize, the threat will dramatically decrease. So that's one possibility to kind of hang our hats on and hope for. The other thing is we had initially, I know yesterday I was talking about the potential for widespread wind damage. Looking at some of the stuff we're seeing today, with the storms initiating along this prefrontal convergence zone as opposed to a cold front, not as confident that we're going to have this transition to a bow echo or a squall line that produces widespread wind damage. So it's actually a possibility we could just see supercells for a long period of time tracking across the area into the evening hours, as opposed to a rapid transition to a squall line, which is a little bit more typical for this area of the country. Like I said, this is all just some of our latest thinking based on some of the latest guidance we've looked at this morning. Things are likely to change. Our thoughts are likely to change. Really, it's a little bit too soon to start talking about timing in any one location. The general idea is that the highest or the most significant tornado threat will be during the evening hours tomorrow, but we could have severe thunderstorm and even some tornado threat earlier than that, especially as you get out west of Chicago towards north central Illinois, where the severe threat could begin as early as 3 or 4 o'clock. But the threat will generally be on the increase as you head later into the afternoon and more so into the evening. So that's it. It's been a live briefing from the National Weather Service in Chicago. We will likely conduct an additional live NOAA Weather Radio broadcast and briefing tomorrow afternoon or late morning regarding the latest thinking as we get a look at the latest data tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. We now return to regular programming.
Likely in the evening, then showers and thunderstorms.